I am hoping you guys are excited about this as these two guys are about this. When we were putting this festival together and trying to figure out what kind of people and who we wanted to have at this, we had, I think, Dr. West secured, and we were doing some research and finding out who's been talking to who and who's been doing interviews, and we started finding a common thread between these two people in terms of how they have each spoken about each other and have been influenced by each other's work, and then it occurred to us that they have never met. And so we got a brainstorm in our committee and said, we should change that and make something different happen. So I think you need to be aware this is a historic lecture. I think, because we'll be posting this lecture, and I think there are going to be people, bloggers, and other people talking about this in the next several weeks, because this is going to be a great conversation. And this is going to be a little bit like jazz, and so it'll be improvisation. We're not quite sure how long it's going to go. I'm pretty sure it's going to go longer than it was planned. And also there will be a time for questions and answers. So we'll just let this go and see how it happens. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Cornel West, and for tonight, Dr. Lupe Fiasco.
Oh, what a blessing to be here at Calvin College. I'm telling you, just to be able to be on the stage with the most important hip-hop artists of his generation, Lupe Fiasco. But I want to begin by acknowledging my dear brother Kenneth Hefner. Now, let's give him a hand. Thank you so very much, brother. Where is he? Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Is he up? You went to the thing? Definitely. And similarly so for my dear sister Jackie Rhodes. Where is she? Where is she? Oh, yes, it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. And we salute each and every one of you, both for your attendance here as well as the concert tonight. See a real artist at work. I want to begin with a question for my brother, because I tell you, I'm just so excited. I'm ready to rhetorically break dance right in front of you. Yeah.
Let me. The tone for me is this is monumental. This being. This is monumental for me. So if it's giddiness and some shyness and humility, I'm humbled in the presence of this man. This is a dream come true for me. So.
Wow. Man, that's very beautiful, man. No, I'm the one humble.
Let's just lay that groundwork out. If I burst into laughter, tears, or run off stage, that's why. So.
Lord, I'm the one humble. But let me start off this way then, really, to link the genius of Lupe Fiasco to the tradition that produced both of us. It was his 70th birthday yesterday of Marvin Gaye. There is no Cornel West or Lupe Fiasco without Marvin Gaye in terms of the depth of a tradition. John Hope Franklin just died this last week. There is no Cornel West, Lupe Fiasco without a John Hope Franklin that's part of that tradition. And of course, 41 years ago tomorrow, our dear brother, when I say our dear brother, I'm talking about every color in this room, Martin Luther King Jr., shot down like a dog, Lorraine Hotel, in front of room 306 on that balcony, so that we're part of a tradition. And this younger generation, I'm Motown Philly Sound Stacks, Al Green, Aretha Franklin, the Whisper Stylistics generation, the younger generation, part of the same tradition, but of course at the same time, that tradition at its height produced geniuses who become rocks, and the new ones are foam building on the rocks, but you have to be involved in finding your voice. And my question for my dear brother is, how would he characterize, especially this reform notion? We here at Calvin College now. Oh yeah, we haven't forgotten about that. This reform notion of a calling, of a beruf, of a vocation, your calling as an artist. When did that first hit you, and how do you understand that calling?
When I was probably probably 10 years old.
I was that early. Fascinating.
My background is my mother was a intellectual and a chef, gourmet chef, and my father was a Renaissance man. He was a martial artist. He was an engineer. He was a philosopher, a musician. He wore many coats, and I was always involved in music. Our household was there was sitars and xylophones and guitars and keyboards and a massive record collection and a massive collection of just odds and ends and things, and also a lot of social ideology and material and artifacts and things of that nature that were in the house, and cultural influences from all over the world, political influences from all over the world. He was part of the Black Panther movement, part of just the life movement, the do better for yourself movement in every level, in every capacity. And though that mixture was like, okay, now what are you gonna do? What are you gonna? How is this affecting you? What are you gonna produce from this upbringing, from all these things? And words came out, and those words reflected. Initially, they were baby steps of just learning how to use them, and what was around. My initial music experience was literally gibberish. It was just making words rhyme, learning how to put words together in the form of raps and hip hop and things of that nature. And eventually, when I got old enough to understand the things that I was taught and the things that I was shown, all those political, cultural, geopolitics and spiritual what have yous, once I got old enough to understand it, I put that with my skills as an MC, and I started to articulate those things. So between 11, another kind of renaissance around 15, then another renaissance around 18, then there was probably another kind of hard-hitting that took place around 22, and now they're like every day.
That's rich. That's rich.
And it became a vocation when I started to get paid. That's when it was like, oh yeah.
Well, that's that dialectical tension between vocation and profession.
Oh, okay.
Yes, indeed. Now we know there's no vocation without invocation, just like there's no calling without recalling. And we know that the anthem of a blues people is lift every voice, not echo. So how do you become courageous enough to lift your voice so you're not just imitating with an echo? Right. You have a voice. Early on, you got a voice. That's a hard thing. Took Coltrane a little while to get his voice. He was imitating Johnny Hodges' Duke Ellington band for a long time. Until Monk and others said, Train, when you going to say what you got to say? And we see that in everything, hip-hop, we see in jazz, rhythm, blues, and so forth. So that in your wrestling with your vocation, invocation means trying to be in conversation with the voices of the past and the present who help you find your voice. Who would be some of those voices? Voices dead and voices contemporary with you.
Jay-Z was Jay-Z, Ghostface, and Nas for the actual mimic what they do. I want to be as good as them, in content and delivery and style and swag and what have you. But then it flip-flops and it becomes Oh, it's vast. Let me pick a few good ones. A few good ones out the hat. It's mm, it's you. It's
Well, you're going pretty deep in the barrel there. I mean, oh, but
it's
Lord.
it's James Baldwin.
Oh, yes. Now I can understand that.
It's Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Hunter S. Without the drugs. Um, it it's it's characters from movies. You know, it's like it's so many influences and there's so many people. You know, that just come in and out. It could be a homeless man on the corner, and he doesn't even. We don't even have a conversation. I'm just noticing his life and his movements, and my mind starts to go through the cycles of playing out his life or playing out the steps that got him to where he is, and the his decisions, and then the world's decisions, the people above him and the decisions they made that got him to that place, and that speaks to me, you know, and that's an influence, and I become his voice, you know, and then I look and I see the bus driver and the decisions she made and everything, and I become her voice. And then going back to like my song specifically, the skateboarder kid, the black skateboarder kid, ostracized. Um, I take his voice, and I started to come up with just like it's humanity, you know. And it's all forms of humanity. It's the hated, the oppressed. It's the elite. It's the middle class. It's the upper class. It's the lower class. It's the no class. And it just became like those are my inspirations. Those are my voices channeled through Nas and Jay-Z and Ghostface. And this is how you say it, but this is what you say, you know. And it became less about me. I started to notice that my voice went away, and it blended in, it harmonized with everybody else's voice, and I started to see that like with this, it's the same thing, you know. There's idiosyncrasies and little things hither thither that separate, make different, but the main things, the main motivations and the main drives are the same. And when I had that epiphany moment, that was the renaissance that took place when I was like 22, 21, 22. And I was like, wow, you know, is everyone, you know, it's people on both sides of the fence. It's maybe harsh, and it's the compassionate and the ones with no compassion. I can understand and articulate both of their struggles because they both have struggles, and where it came from. And what I figured out was a lot of times it didn't come from them. You know, it came from, they went through the same process that I went through. You know, they reached a point where they lost their voice and they started to speak for a mass or speak for an ideology that was around them as opposed to something that was coming from them. So a lot of times I don't even really take credit for what I do because I'm like, well, that's, you know, it came from me for the sake of, you know, physically, yeah, I spoke it, but where it actually came from, it came from you, you know.
You're feeling like a kind of vehicle through which something is working, but you don't want to downplay your own individual creativity, though. No doubt about that. Because I think you connect vocation and voice to vision. Now, somewhere, of course, we read where there is no vision, the people perish. The difference between a vision and a stare. I can conceive of certain forms of music, certain forms of hip hop where you get stares that are not empowering. They might stimulate your body, but they don't stir your soul. So they're not enabling and enhancing, they're just titillating. That's a stare. Vision, in the biblical sense, enabling, empowering. So that lifting voice, James Weldon Johnson, courage, compassion, and vocation, the calling, and then the vision. And you just laid out a magnificent international, global, and cosmopolitan vision. I think this is very important for all the young brothers and sisters here of all colors and the students here. Right? Nothing human is alien to this brother. Nothing human. Different cultures, classes, civilizations, and so on. But when you think, even though you're so very young, especially compared to me, chronologically I'm speaking, we're not talking spiritually now, that's chronological. But the fusion of those three, vocation and voice and vision, how would you want to see your legacy understood? Even though you still, in some ways, are taking out.
Legacy is a strong
No, it is. It is.
and it comes with I live for the moment a lot of times. Whereas I understand that the only thing constant in the world is change. So I could change tomorrow, because I succumb to my own, what I want, but also succumb to they and what they want and what they put in process. And so I'm affected by both of those. So with that, I always know that I'm capable of changing, on one hand, if I change for the worse, I don't want to be remembered. If I change for the better, I just want to be remembered as he did not lead them astray. Not that he's multi-Grammys and, his songs and his accolades and his what he's achieved on paper, and he did not lead them astray. That's my fear. To lead astray, to create the cycle, the butterfly effect of me being the role model, the example of you doing wrong, I always say that if I tell a lie on my records and I sell 1 million records, I've told 1 million lies.
Wow.
And then
That's deep. That's deep. That's
those
deep.
those million people that bought that record, possibly the one fan who bought 25, which happened. But those people ingested that. They internalized it. They saw it. They heard it. It affected them. That 4 seconds which was the length of that lie, which they could have filled with 4 seconds of the truth. That 4 seconds is going to affect me. That 4 seconds speaks volumes way beyond the rest of the good. To me, that 4 seconds outweighs the 60 minutes. So for me, I want to be remembered as he did not lead them astray. And if he led them astray, I don't want to be remembered at all.
Well, I'm just kind of silent on that for a bit, though, brother. That's powerful. I mean, the wonderful thing is food and liquor and the cool. You already leading folk in the good direction. But at the same time, I hadn't thought of not wanting to be remembered at all. So you take your calling so seriously that if you really don't follow through in the quest for the truth, you'd rather it just be eliminated and eradicated.
My father's last words via my sister to me were, tell the truth. Tell Wasalu, which is my real name, tell Wasalu to tell the truth. And that congealed, that everything that was loose in my life, it became concrete and it became solid with that, with his word, with his dying words. And so it's like, okay, and taking that on means that I take everything that comes with it. There's truth, and telling the truth, that's a battle. That's a war that you just waged against the seen and the unseen. And there's an army of lies, there's an army of untruth on the other side of the battlefield. And when you take up arms of the truth, that's a real serious thing. It's nothing whimsical about that. And the truth affects, the truth hurts. The truth destroys. It may destroy the facade, but people love the facade, deeply.
That's true.
And when you come with, the sledgehammer of truth to start knocking down the statues and, pushing down the cities and stuff like that, you create enemies. You open yourself up to a whole gambit of enemies, the enemies with the friendly faces, the enemies who on the surface that they're enemies, and you also start to bring out the enemy in yourself. You start to do battle with yourself. The first battlefield is here and here. And it's a very powerful thing. It's that 15 minutes before you go to sleep and you start recollecting on the day becomes a very powerful place in life. So the drasticness, is that a word? Drasticness.
It is now, brother.
Of the statement of not being remembered at all if I've led them astray is to me that's part of it. That's part of the decision that I made, and I accept that.
Yeah. Because it seems to me that there is a difference. You tell me what you think between a philosophical conception of truth that just wants to make some accurate claims about the world, and then there's an artistic conception of truth. Let's say, to go back to Shakespeare's Hamlet, to thine own self be true, and as night follows day, that can be false to no one. So that as an artist, if you're going to be true to yourself, wrestling with that civil war inside of your soul, all of us have things inside of us that, if we're true to that, could be expressed, which could be misconstrued, misunderstood. Think of Marvin Gaye, for example.
Right.
What's going on? Oh, yes, he got some deep truth there. But let's get it on. He's got some deep truth there. I want you, troubled man. We can go on and on. You see what I mean? Right. Because Marvin's being true to himself, and when he looks at himself, he sees a lot of what is inside of all of us, what Samuel Beckett called mess. Being in time and space, and the death sentence in time and space. No one gets out of time and space alive with our mess. Now, being true to our mess, you got a mess, I got a mess. Mine's longer, deeper, but I got a mess now. Now, being true to that mess, couldn't you still end up unintentionally maybe misleading? But you're telling these folk, I'm being true to me. I don't want you to imitate me. I'm being true to myself, and by being true to myself, I'm displaying some of my mess and hope that you will sidestep it, but one can view it in such a way that they might mislead. You see the point I'm trying to make? Does that make sense? What do you think?
Yeah. My conception, my reaction to that is the concept of self, the makeup of self. Okay. The initial self is very simple, simplicity achieved, which is nothingness, so to speak. When you were first born, you came out with teeth, no teeth, some people with teeth, hair, no hair. You came out simple. There was basics, the most primitive of urges of hunger and affection. And as you grow to become yourself, you are taught by others. You take on concepts from others, from outside, from without. The things that you hold within are very basic. You have the capacities of mind to process things, but when you process them based on It could be a moral code or lack of a moral code. When you process it, you always process it on against something that you've learned from someone else. And you start to see that the concept of self is, to me, is a corrupted concept. And that's not a statement of going against it or becoming an adversary to it. It's more so just making the statement like, yeah, self is a corrupted situation. There's nothing pure about self, especially in society. If we were all floating in bubbles in space, it'd be like, hey, it's so pure, but we're not. We're walking, talking human beings within cities and rural areas or whatever that were brought up in schools and universities, and we're taught ideologies and concepts in television and marketing and advertising and radio and all these forces building you up. So there are certain aspects and certain messages that were given to you, that were implanted in you, which carried corruptness, which carried senses, which come out into the world as materialism, which come out into the world as just inhumanity, that come from places of want and lack of compassion and things of that nature, which were based on very sound economic principles, which is based on marketing and advertising. A lot of the stuff that we take in is advertising to buy product, So there's what is the makeup of that knowledge of that message that was put into you? Was that message meant to empower you? Was that message meant to build you up? Was it to give you some type of great outsight about the world and a great insight of yourself? Or was it merely meant for you to buy a product? So you have to check in your mind everything that is in your head, which I think is part of go out into the desert for 40 days. You have to check your mind and your soul to see what the garbage is, to see what the mess is. Because that mess is, if you speak for the sake of speaking and for the sake of the now, as opposed to sitting back and thinking about what you're going to say. If you just speak for the now, and from now I'm going to entertain, now I have to entertain right now, you're going to get a lot of mess. You're going to get, even with I want to tell a good story, I want to tell a positive message, your message is so intertwined with the mess, and you didn't separate it good enough. You didn't dilute it enough. You spent 39 days instead of the 40. You're gonna get that. You're gonna get the misconception, and you're gonna get the corrupted message. But then there's also, you're telling it to someone. Mm-hmm. It's not just to you. That's right. So you're telling it to other corrupted individuals with the mess inside of them, and they're taking your message in the midst of taking all the other messages. You can come on stage, or you can video, and they won't hear what you're saying. They possibly couldn't understand what you're saying. They don't know the meaning of your words. Specifically if you go to Japan, they don't know what I'm saying. They can repeat it, but they don't know it. They don't understand it. So they look at what I have on, and that's the message that they take. It's like, well, he looked cool, or he had on this, and that's what they take away from the show, and him jumping around on stage, and the beats. Like, yeah, the beat was nice. So it's various levels of interaction and how people actually take it and how people misconceive it, and you can have a audience of just the most articulate, most smart individuals. And there could still be some misconception, because there's schools of thought that take place from extreme moral code. It's not just one solid moral code that people follow. So it comes from like different places. So what you might think is positive gets thrown up against a wall of people who think that it's not positive. You know, so it's all part of the mess of the world. I think what we have is we have the mess. The world is a mess, you know, and we're products of the world. The world is not a product of us. So we take on the mess of the world. We take on the chaos that built the world and the chaos that built the universe. And that's just, to me, I'm smiling because it just shows it's more proof for me that there is a God. You know, that when I look up and I see the chaos of the sky at night, I feel this. When I think, I'm like, I'm chaotic too. So we got the same. Hey, I know man didn't create that. You know.
No, I think for me, one of the reasons why your art is so crucial at this moment, and why the significance of what you're doing, is that there's a deep spirituality there. I think if I were there with the Japanese brothers and sisters in Tokyo, and they were to see you perform just like we will tonight, that even if they didn't understand the English words, they would discern a spirituality at work through the words, through the music, through the body movement and the way you stylize space and time with your corporality, with your body. What is it about that spirituality? Because we're in a moment now, these are catastrophic times. There's been so much hypocrisy, mendacity, social misery, you know what I mean? So that when somebody comes along with the kind of profundity, with the kind of honesty and the kind of willingness to quest for the truth that you see in your work, it does surface. And so in that sense, there's certain historical conditions and circumstances, I think, that allow for you to surface in this way. Now, we can link that to providence, general, or special, and get theological about it, but we'll hold off on that. But I do believe something is at work in that regard. You see it in Curtis Mayfield in the 60s and 70s. You see it in the Last Poets. You see it in me. Oh, yes. See it in Gil Scott-Heron. You know what I mean? And I know we in Grand Rapids, and this is the city of the barge, right? Oh, those are some serious folk. Lord, those are some serious folk. Now, the barge, not Curtis, he know that. But, he's a serious artist. But the challenge here is trying to tease out that spirituality. And I guess the last question before we open it up for questions from the audience is, how would you characterize your spirituality? Where does it come from?
Well, I was born Muslim. For y'all to know, I was born Muslim. But I would find myself in Baptist churches at like 5 years old.
That's a good place to be now. But I love my Muslim brothers and sisters. I want that to be known, and no doubt about it.
Then a part of my father's library was things like the Bushido Code, and Taoism and Buddhism, and pieces of Judaica and Star Wars. All these artifacts and things that were created for religious purposes and what have you. And from that, I started to see a lot of similarities. I started to see similarities in the way that Muslims pray and the way that Buddhists pray. And I started to see, like, Buddhists prostrate too. And they're way before Islam. It's way before Christianity. It's way before. It's like, whoa. And I started to really look at, as I had my renaissances and my epiphany moments and my growing up moments and stuff like that, I would go back and read religious scripture with a different want, with a different set of eyes, with a smarter set of eyes, with a more understanding. And I would see that there was a chain of, since Adam, there was religions that had came and went, but they're all based from the same place, and are based on the same ideologies and the same rules in a lot of aspects. But there would just be variations, from here and there, little small tiny things, little technicalities that, okay, you can do this now. Y'all messed that up. Can't do that no more. Do this now. Remember you did that before? Y'all was cool, so I'm gonna let y'all do that again. But the message stayed the same. The message of compassion stayed the same. The messages of shunning materialism, those things started to strike a chord with me more than anything. I was always comfortable with there's a God and there's one God, and understood, that there's sins and that there's retribution and there's karma, which is a concept from Buddhism. That people still, in any religion, secular, no religion, that still believe in I'll do bad, it's going to come back to me. All of that stuff started to come together for me, and it was just like, well, there's something going on here. There's something afoot amidst all these different religions and all these different spirits. There's some truth in this. There's punching holes through all of the dogma, all of the technicality, all of the ritual, all of the cultural tradition, not the religious tradition, the cultural tradition. And I started to see, like, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with just to be piercing, I don't agree with slavery. Arabs were one of the main pushers of slavery, and they're Muslim. I was like, whoa. You mean the reason I'm here and the reason I'm facing this and the reason that, the cemeteries and the social injustice and the brainwashing and all of this came from the religion that I was born into? Those are the people behind the scenes. And I started to make my separations from culture and religion. And then I started to even separate religion from spirituality, And I started to see the contaminants that were put in from man, And I started to bake and filter that stuff off and brush it off. And I used to be scared or thought that I would do something wrong if I even picked up a book that wasn't an Islamic text. Like I was just doing some sin of some sorts, and it was mirrored by my friends who were Christian and Hindu, It was like if I participate even by touching it, I'm doing. I was like, where did that come from? Where's, what institutions put that into effect that made that law that that you should have a fear of even investigating another religion, where did that don't make no sense. So all that started to get pushed aside for me, and I just started to really go off what I felt, not what I thought, what I felt, and it's like the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism speak loudly to me just as much as surahs from the Quran, just as much as Psalms from the Old Testament, like they speak just as loud because they carry that same pure message, the message that man could not create because man is not pure. So those things that come down, and I was like, compassion and just compassion alone, that was enough. Love and it may be trippy and hippie and love, but it's real.
I tell you though, brother, it sounds like John Coltrane's "A Love Supreme." It is looking at all of these traditions of humankind, trying to make vertical connection to a deity and horizontal connection to other persons, all of them with crooked hearts, trying to love their crooked neighbors, but also being open to one's own roots, because Coltrane had R-O-O-T-S, the roots. He come out of the Black Methodist AME Zion. But then he's got routes, R-O-U-T-E-S. And there's a dialectical interplay between the roots and the routes. You need the roots as springboard, but you got to be able to be embracing, to learn from all the different traditions. And yet for you, like Coltrane, love, compassion, empathy, other regarding activity is at the center of it all. Yeah, that's rich. I want to add a footnote, though, that we Christians made major contribution to slavery. He mentioned the Arab brother, and he's very kind. He mentioned the Muslim. We Christians did, and a small slice of Jewish brothers and sisters, too. So it was a pretty religiously promiscuous activity.
It's an equal opportunity.
Equal opportunity. That's right. Called greed, greed, greed. Just like the last 15 years, but we won't get into that. Let's open it up for questions. Let's open it up for questions and queries, though. Lord left. Is that Brother David? Is that Brother David from Princeton? What a blessing to see you, man. We were in graduate school together.
Oh, wow.
Good God Almighty.
Graduate degree in philosophy. Make something yourself, or you can just sort of settle into the woodwork like other people do. Welcome back. Good to have you here. I'd like to ask both you, Cornel and Lupe, say something about how is hip-hop, it's clearly African-American, it's American. How is it African? What are the African dimensions in the hip-hop phenomenon?
Woo! That's a good question. Woo! That's another philosopher you see raising these deep questions.
Africa's the cradle,
Yes.
of life. Wipe away any modern definitions of Africa, anything's going on, the things that go on in Africa. My struggle is alive and well in my heart today because I came from Africa. It all comes back to, well, what is your main thing? It's like, yeah, I was, my ancestors were enslaved, but you ripped them from Africa. They came from, everything started there. The day that, like, you know what, you coming with us. The day that happened back in 1490, whatever. I'm talking about my great grandfather. When that happened, it sparked what I do today. That direct kind of like line of motivation from that. So I'm not even going to get into the music and the more just kind of like surface things about it, djembes on the songs or the dancing and stuff like that, because everything changes. More of it comes from soul music, which comes from the blues, which comes from, and we get into that kind of lineage. For me, it's more about what I talk about in particular, and the what happened because of slavery to create those situations that created the hood, not the neighborhoods, the hood, that facilitated the ignorance, that facilitated the oppression. The root of that took us from Africa. That's when police brutality, okay, let's get that out the way. Cocaine, crack cocaine, get out of Rockefeller drug laws, push all that out. And when you start to push back through time, you get back to the shores of what, Western Africa, and that, for me, that is just, oh man, that affects my music in so many ways. It's the reason I do music.
No, that's powerful. I would say that hip hop can be characterized as African culture postmodernized. And what I mean by that is polyrhythmic, centrality of the drum, Don't even have a drum solo in all of European modern music. It's not a drum-centered music. It's rich. The drum is not central. Africa, it is. It is also antiphonal. Call and response. No spectators. So when you hear this brother tonight, you don't come just to hear Lupe Fiasco. You come to help Lupe Fiasco be Lupe Fiasco as the artist, because it's going to be call and respond. It's going to be antiphonal. You got to be in it together. He don't want spectators. Oh, look at him. Yeah, he doing his thing. No, you got to be into it. Like that Baptist church you spend a little time in. Antiphonal. Just like our dialogue is African. It's antiphonal. See? We help each other in terms of recognizing we in the mess together. Like all of us, and we all trying to help each other out. But the last thing is, of course, by postmodern, there's also it's polyvocal, but it's under New World circumstances. And what makes it U.S. and New World for me, it is a continuation of the blues tradition. Because when I see my dear brother, I do see Muddy Waters in him. I see Skip James in him. I see Son House in him. I see Robert Johnson in him. I see Bessie Smith in him, you see. Why? Because those characteristics in the music are produced and created by a peoples who have been dealing with catastrophic circumstances. See, the blues is an autobiographical chronicle of a personal catastrophe expressed lyrically. So that it is the expression of a peoples with those characteristics under slavery, under Jim Crow, under Jane Crow, under hood conditions. Schools, education, levels of unemployment, underemployment. There comes hip-hop, Bronx, African Bambaataa, Kool Herc. Uh-oh, here come KRS-One. Oh, Lord, there go Rakim. On and on and on. You see what I mean? Lyrically, artistically, musically expressing with those characteristics under catastrophic circumstances or mindful of them. Chuck D's lower middle class, highly mindful of the catastrophic circumstances, but different than African Bambaataa. He's out in Roosevelt, he's out in Long Island. But he's connected to it. Same way with Lupe Fiasco, you see. He's free enough to be himself, connected to the catastrophic circumstances, African in a postmodern form. Is that two answers to the question? Yeah. All right.
First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to ask this question. I've been anticipating this moment for the last 2.5 years. I actually am from Hamlet, North Carolina, home of John Coltrane.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and I tried to get in contact with Professor West to tell him I was coming to Calvin because I'm trying to become what he is, an African-American Christian theologian and cultural critic. But I have a question about the genius of hip-hop. I actually come from a jazz tradition. Actually, I'm Church of God in Christ. I'm not supposed to listen to jazz. But I come from a jazz tradition, and I like Jimmy Smith and Coltrane, and I'm trying to understand what makes hip-hop a genius in the sense of what you talk about in Keeping Faith about the genius of black artistic culture. I'm trying to understand it from my generation, the generation that listened to Art Blakey and that kind of thing.
I listen to Max Roach, and I listen to Miles Davis.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
My first foray into music alone was because of Benny Goodman and the clarinet. I wanted to play the clarinet like Benny Goodman. My influences: jazz, the syncopation, the changes of rhythm, the how one part of the song doesn't sound like there's no repetition in the song. Everything's completely different. Robert Glasper is like my favorite song in the world right now. He has a song called either G&B or FTB, which is my favorite song in the world right now. Even though I can't really remember the name that doesn't speak. It's not my favorite song. There is a level of of course, because it's the spoken word of it, there's a level of high intelligence in the music, the same way there's a level of high intelligence in jazz. The same approach to the minuscule, the micro, the note for note, and how those notes interact, and then layering that upon other notes from other sounds, other instruments, other things, and then making that speak to a time in society. You know, jazz from the 30s doesn't sound like jazz from the 60s, you know? And they had to start creating different genres within jazz. There's bebop, you know, big band, there's avant-garde, you know. So there's a certain, you can see how the jazz, and I'm speaking just on instrumentation, how there's a change in it that reflects a change in the society, that it affects a change in culture, you know, and you can see it. Same thing in hip hop. Why is that? Why is there certain eras of hip hop, you know? Why is there a certain level of going back to the amount of thought that is put into the music? It's taking this sample from this record from just 2 seconds, you know, and taking that 2 seconds from a jazz record, taking 2 seconds of that jazz record and expanding it into just this lush soundscape that informs and that also moves you and that also is it entertains, you know. It's like just with 2 seconds, you know. So for me, it's like, wow, you can do that with just 2 seconds, but then you put that over anything, because you can do that with opera. You can take this opera sample, and then you could take this koto drum sample from Japan, or you could take this anywhere. You give a hip hop producer any form of music from anywhere, he's going to understand it, he's going to break it apart, and he's going to re-synthesize it into something that's new, something that's going to inform you, something that's going to expand what you do, you know. And that genius isn't just a genius that's in hip-hop, it's in music. That's the genius of music in any form. To me, the closest relative to hip-hop, for me, is punk music. It comes from oppression. It's a product of oppression. It's a product of not having a lot, you know. Like we had turntables, they had guitar. You know, the messages in it, the musicality of it, you know. To me, those are like closer relatives than I would say jazz is to hip hop. With jazz, I got to make much more. I got to go leaps and bounds to try and make the connection. But with punk music, you know, alone, like just to see where it comes from and see where it emanates, and the amount of time put into the music, which people can kind of go against hip hop and say, well, you know, you guys just take, you're not playing the music, you know, and I always put punk in that face. We're like, look at punk, you know, society doesn't agree with it. Certain people don't agree with it. We have some of the same enemies. We talk about some of the same things. We come from ghettos. We come from the same places. We deal with drugs. We deal with sexuality. We deal with all these different things, you know. Now what about that? If it's just on the surface, you know, and then it starts to go into somewhere else. Once we establish that, once we relate it to a music that you actually respect, you know, then we start to go into other realms of who's doing it as opposed to what it is. I'm sorry, I strayed a little bit, but Mr.
No,
West,
but the point you were making, I want to build on in terms of genius, because if we begin with the geniuses we can all agree upon, we all agree Ludwig von Beethoven is a genius. So was Mozart. So was Brahms. I think Stephen Sondheim is a genius when it comes to musical theater. Stevie Wonder is a genius. Now, what is it about all of them? Mastery of craft, unbelievable critical intelligence, and combative imaginations that push the boundaries. So the problem is going to be, if you're trying to convince somebody that Beethoven was a genius, you have no cultivated appreciation whatsoever that goes into making a judgment as to whether, you know, Opus 131, the greatest string quartet ever written, is an act of genius, because you can't appreciate it. You haven't been taught how to appreciate it, the nuances, the subtleties, what went into the making of, the composing of the music vis-a-vis the quartets of Haydn and others. Hip-hop's the same way. Where'd my brother go? There he is in the back. Yeah, I'd like to be able to see you. Hip-hop's the same way. It's the lyrical genius of Jay-Z, the lyrical genius of Rakim, the lyrical genius of this brother here. You have to have a cultivation of the nuances and subtleties that go into the mastery of the craft, which means you have to have some idea of the history of the craft, the emergence of the craft. You see, what was going on in 79? What has happened in 82, 84, Scarface? We go on and on and on. Then how do you detect the critical intelligence at work in it? Not just the wordsmithery, which is crucial, but more than that. You know, Wittgenstein thought that Shakespeare was not a great artist because he was just a wordsmith. He couldn't feel Shakespeare's spirituality. Wittgenstein, you're a philosophic genius. You're wrong. Shakespeare is a genius. You're just not prepared. You're not cultivated enough to see the genius of Shakespeare. And isn't that something? If Wittgenstein couldn't see it, then we all shouldn't feel too bad. So when you come to hip-hop geniuses, we have to make sure we are cultivated enough, understanding the master of the craft, able to detect the critical intelligence, and then see the combative imagination of pushing it in so many different directions. Now, there's something going on in Chicago with Lupe and Kanye West and Common and Rhyme Fest and Malik Yusuf and Neo Abyss. What is going on in Chicago? I don't know. We won't get into that, but that's interesting in terms of so much intelligence, imagination right now in that particular genre. That's fascinating. We won't even say a word about Obama coming out of Chicago. That's Chicago got something happening.
Okay, we're on. I need to wrap it up, so we're going to finish because we got to get people off to the next workshops. This question is going to be for Dr. Fiasco, and it's our clues. We have a tradition of doing these conversations. Almost all the artists who come here. We did a great conversation with Kanan a few weeks ago. Our closing question always is this. You've already referred to this, there is this conversation that happens at a live performance, which doesn't happen in other ways. It doesn't happen with a compact disc, in which there is a relationship between the artist and the audience. Something happens there which we don't fully understand. And there is something the audience is supposed to bring because you're picking it up. I don't know quite how you're doing it, but you're able to sense something. What do we need to do as an audience to help you to make this a better communication? What's our job?
Oh, wow.
Because we can't just come into this thing passively. It's not just entertainment. We've got a job to do. So what should we do?
I don't know, man. I'm so self-critical. You know, I always see the flaw in what I do. So I always be like, it wasn't their fault. It was my fault. You know. So honestly, I'm like, it wasn't their fault. But if you could, you know, I'm not a demanding. I always feel like it's me, you know. But I think that's there's some narcissistic selfishness in that. So I'll in my therapy, I'll get rid of that and say, start demanding things from the crowd. If it's seats, like stand up.
Yeah, that's right. That's
you know,
right.
if it's,
That's right.
it's like seat, or we'll put thumbtacks in the seats. It is. If you don't know the words, act like you know the words. If you do know the words, say the words. Try and figure out when the beat is gonna drop, and I always put the mic out there. That's unison time. Like everybody at once say, because when the silence just strikes to the core. It's such a painful shot. If I stage dive, catch me. That's the number one rule. If you run on stage, be cool. And don't fight the security when they throw you off. That's a part of running on stage. But just, come, be there. you know, if it's something that you don't like, let me know. I have no problem stopping the song if you don't like it. And going to the next one. You do it you do it at home or in the car. Like, I don't really like that song. Just be like, just do this. Be like, it's a democracy, so there has to be a, you know, there has to be more people like than not. But if I can see a good enough amount of people, like, we'll go to the next song and knock it out. That's all my demands.
That's good.
Thank you.
Bye, brother.
Cornel West. Cornel West, ladies and gentlemen. Cornel West.
Lupe.
I want to thank everybody for coming out. Really appreciate it. This was I felt like I was in the audience with you guys. Like, this guy is such an influence and an inspiration and empowering figure for me. I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to sit across from him and actually dialogue with him. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You know how blessed I am.